Hey guys, and welcome back to Ultra Game World. And today we are looking at the Gigabyte A320M-H. Now this is a micro ATX motherboard currently on Amazon.co.uk for only £20. 20 British pounds, that's all it is. So that's like a couple of maybe 4 Big Mac meals or something. I mean, that's really no money nowadays. This looks a really decent board. I mean, it's on the A320 chipset, so that means it's only Ryzen 3000 compatible. So your Ryzen 5000 series, like your 5600X and 5600G and 5700X and what have you, aren't going to be compatible on this motherboard. But everything up to a 3900X or even a 3950X actually will be compatible with this motherboard. What do we get for £20? Now let's have a little look at the back. So as I said, this is AMD Ryzen. This motherboard is for AMD Ryzen processors, obviously up to only the 3000 series, but it does support the 1000 and 2000 series, so anything like a 1600 or a 2600 would be perfectly fine for this motherboard too. It's got an okay VRM. I mean, it's okay, it will do the job, but obviously there's nothing where you're going to want to put in realistically. You're not really going to want to put in a 3900X or anything like that. I would say the maximum CPU you should go up to is a 3700X, and anything more would be a bit too much for this motherboard. But it does have a basic VRM. It has support for NVMe PCIe Gen 3 slot, so if you have a NVMe drive you will be able to use that, and I'm pretty sure that can go up to like anything you need it to, like even like 4 terabytes if you really want to go that far. So that's really handy for a £20 motherboard to have an NVMe drive support. Is really good. Only 2 DIMM slots, so there is a bit of a limitation there. It is only obviously micro ATX motherboard as well, so again there's a little bit of a limitation there too. But nowadays I think more and more micro ATX cases are being produced, so don't see that too much of a problem. But without further ado, let's crack on with the unboxing. I'll give a little overview. So just opening up the box here. Obviously what you kind of expect for only £20. This is very basic motherboard, but we didn't really expect anything else. Let's have a look to see what we get here. This is a I/O shield, pretty standard, and we have our 2 SATA cables as well, so pretty standard there. There's nothing else there, and then there's just the motherboard. Let's take the motherboard out. For anything below the motherboard, yes there is. There is a beer coaster, or also known as a CD. There is a little sort of user manual, very basic obviously, not many pages, but a very basic thing there for you. And a quick multilingual installation guide as well. So that's just basic things like installing your CPU and your RAM and what have you. Nothing really much else there, so we'll leave the box and we'll put the motherboard on the box, and then we have a bit of a closer look at this. So this is actually a very small micro ATX as well. This is actually, I'd say it's actually like a miniature size, almost actually smaller than your typical micro ATX. What we've got here is a pretty basic board. It's a 4-phase by 2-phase sort of VRM setup, so not really going to be anything amazing, but will be enough for pretty much most processors. This could be an ideal sort of like 3200G or 3400G board. 8-pin CPU connection, pretty standard, and your 24-pin motherboard connection here for your power, pretty standard. Obviously 2 DIMM slots. I think it's only going to support up to 32 gigabytes because it's only 2 DIMM slots, but I'll put that on the screen if not, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. We have 4 SATA ports here, so pretty good expansion. if you are potentially wanting to put hard drives as well in there. Obviously our NVMe support here, it's also got a pre-installed screw here, so you won't lose the screw hopefully, because sometimes they put the screw in the box and then obviously it gets lost, but you know, this one's actually pre-installed, which is nice, and it's actually in the correct position for most drives, but you can obviously move it to whatever size drive you have, but most people will have the full sort of, I think it's 2280 sort of size. USB 3.0 port at the bottom, sort of right hand corner. That's fairly well placed, I would say. Sometimes you can get them round here and then you get problems with the graphics cards, because say if you've got it here, you put the cable in and then you have like a fairly long graphics card and it doesn't work. So actually having it at the bottom, that's quite a thoughtful thing I think they've done there from Gigabyte, so props to you. Yeah, we have one system fan here. We obviously have our CPU fan here, and we have no more ports, it seems. I mean, that's a little frustrating. Obviously, most people aren't going to be doing a high-end build, but to only have one system fan connection is a little bit limiting. Now, you can get a splitter, and most splitters can do about sort of 4 to maybe 5 fans, but that's pushing it. I'd say 3 fans would probably be ideal for one fan port, I would say. So most people probably aren't going to use many fans for this. Most typically, and this is why I think the system fan is there, is because most people are going to have a rear fan here, and then they're just going to have their main CPU, heatsink and fan here. I mean, if you have a tower cooler, it's probably going to push air out anyway, and it's going to go out of your case because it's going to have a rear fan as well. So it should be fine really for most builds, sort of most budget builds. It should be perfectly fine, I think. Let's just move down a little bit here. So we have our front panel connections here, sort of like a speaker here. To reset our CMOS is here as well, where you just put little jumpers in, but most people won't use that. 2 USB 2 ports. So that's pretty nice, because most budget cases are actually going to come with USB 2 ports, so to actually have these here as well is actually quite convenient. A Tpm module, so obviously Windows 11 will require Tpm, so this is, I think it's Tpm 1.2 out of the box, but again, I'm not 100% sure, but I'll put it at the bottom of the screen to confirm what support it is. But if you do need an external Tpm module, then that is in use as well here. So this is going to be perfectly fine for Windows 11 if you did want to use this board for Windows 11. And then we have our front audio and sort of like a header for like an audio out, I think that is. The I/O here and the motherboard is extremely basic, but it is £20 of course. So you wouldn't really expect too much out of this. It does come with the mounting plate and brackets, obviously. The 2 brackets at the front here, so if you were going to put a stock cooler on, that's perfectly fine. If you're going to put tower coolers on, perfectly fine. And maybe if you want like a replacement for this, maybe you didn't have it with your motherboard, this might be quite good, because you can just take these out and then use that as well, and not have to buy like a separate plate, because I think off eBay I think they're like £10 on their own anyway, just for like the actual mounting plate, but I could be wrong. But yeah, that's good. So obviously, I just missed out, it's got a PCI Express 16 slots, so this is where your graphics card will go, and then it has 2, I think it's PCIe ×1 slot. So if you were fitting like a Wi-Fi card or Bluetooth card, this would be perfectly fine here, just to stick it probably at the bottom one there, I'd say. But again, you're probably not going to use these 2 ports, but they are there if you need them. So the rear I/O is very basic, it is very basic, but perfectly fine, I think, for what you need. 2 PS2 ports, which don't really like to see in 2021, but it's there. We have a DVI port and a HDMI out port, so obviously integrated graphics are going to be perfect here, because you're probably going to use the HDMI port. Has 6 USB ports, 2 of them which are USB 2, and actually 3 USB 3 ports, so that's very nice actually. I think 6 on a budget motherboard like this is perfectly fine. I would like to see 8, but this is only a £20 motherboard, so I think 6 is perfectly acceptable. sometimes even only see 6 on like a £100 motherboard or something, so that's not too bad. 6, I think it's perfectly acceptable for £20. We obviously have a Gigabyte Ethernet port and just a very basic audio out here, but perfectly usable for like just a normal headset or something just to plug in there, and obviously a microphone as well if you need it. So I think that basically wraps up everything for the overview and unboxing that we had of the Gigabyte A320M-H motherboard. I think overall for £20 is perfectly fine. If it goes up in price, I probably wouldn't buy it. I think for £20 as a replacement motherboard or as like a spare motherboard, if your motherboard did go down for instance, this would be perfectly acceptable. It has everything that you need, the NVMe support, which I think in 2021 is crucial. 2 DIMM slots, which is enough because most people are only going to run 16 gigabytes with a 8 gigabyte set, so 2 8 gigabyte sticks. It has a PCIe Gen 3 x16 slot, so obviously you can fit a modern graphics card in there, no problem. You could probably even fit, well, 3080 if you really want to, even 3090, but obviously you'd have limitations because it's only PCIe Gen 3, but if you really wanted to, it's there. I wouldn't recommend it, but probably realistically I'd say 1660 Super would be about the most you want to run on this graphics card with a 3700X, I'd say. I think anything more than that you're pushing this far too much and you're going to need a better motherboard. But for budget builds, this is going to be perfectly fine. I think overall this is good. To actually have a brand new motherboard for only £20. I keep saying £20, but really £20 is no money, and that's really good value. So hopefully you did like this little overview I did of the board. As a replacement motherboard, this will be perfectly fine, and if I do sort of find a use for this build, which I might put 3200G in it one time, that'll probably be the ideal use for it. But nice little motherboard, and I think overall it would be perfectly fine as a replacement, but probably not as your main rig. But again, you could use it as your main rig, but it's perfectly, you know, it's your decision. Now I hope you liked the video, guys. Please like the video. Please obviously subscribe, because I'm trying to build a subscribe base here. I'm trying to build like a little community on my channel. It really helps me out. So if you could help me out, that would be really, really great. I hope you liked the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.